Welcome to Vanguard, where humans aren't the underdogs. We're the endgame. Enjoy the journey. Zarathek pressed all 4 fingers of her left hand against the freezing inner hull of the Whisper of Stars. The metal vibrated faintly beneath her touch, not with the healthy hum of a working engine, but with the irregular trembling of a machine in the final stages of failure. Somewhere deep inside the ship, something ruptured. A muted thud rolled through the corridors like distant thunder, followed by a thin, constant hiss. Another pressure leak. She exhaled slowly through her narrow breathing slits, careful not to waste a molecule of air. The suit display hovering above her wrist pulsed a warning in dim, amber light. Oxygen remaining. 5 hours, 41 minutes. It had been 6 hours since the crew abandoned ship. 6 hours since the escape pods burned bright and vanished into the black, carrying everyone with them. Everyone except her. Zarathek had stayed, not because she was brave, not because she wanted to die, because someone had to try. The main engine had begun its death song without warning. A low vibration at first, then a rising whine that made her inner ear ache, then the screaming grind of a cascading quantum failure that no engineer in the galaxy could stop once it began. The captain had not hesitated. He had ordered immediate evacuation, voice steady even as the deck plates buckled beneath their feet. Everyone out, now. He had even grabbed her by the arm. Zareth, come with us. She still remembered the way his eyes had looked when she pulled free. Conflicted, pained, but already resigned. I have to try, she had said. The data, 2 years of research. There's no time. There is for me. And then the hatch had sealed between them. The rest of the crew fled into vacuum and uncertainty. Zarathek stayed with a dying ship in the most forbidden region of known space. Now, hours later, she was paying the price for that choice, in shallow breaths in creeping frost. She pushed herself away from the hull and moved down the narrow maintenance corridor, boots echoing softly in the dark. Most of the internal lights were already dead. She had shut down entire decks to preserve what little backup power remained. Each sealed section was another coffin added to the growing graveyard of her ship. As she passed an observation window, she forced herself not to look. Outside, the void sector stretched in every direction, an ocean of wrongness. The stars here were not fixed. They drifted when she was not staring directly at them. Some grew brighter when she blinked. Others dimmed as if retreating from her gaze. Radiation shimmered faintly across invisible currents, like heat distortion in empty space. The Galactic Council had marked this entire region in permanent red 300 years ago. Forbidden. No entry, no exceptions. Every civilization had its myths. Every myth had its graveyard. The void sector had both. She reached a junction where 3 corridors met. The left passage was sealed with emergency bulkheads. The right flickered with intermittent power. Straight ahead, a thin crust of ice coated the deck plates. She chose the frozen path. Her breath crystallized in faint silver clouds as she advanced. The life support system in this section had failed almost completely. The temperature was dropping toward vacuum equilibrium. Another hour, and this corridor would be lethal. She stepped over something drifting slowly along the floor. A glove. Veltari engineering glove. Torn at the wrist. She stopped. For a moment, she simply stood there, listening to the distant groans of the ship as it tore itself apart, piece by piece. The void whispered. Not with words, with memories. Her father's voice drifted through her mind, warm and steady. Every problem has a solution, Zareth, even if the solution is asking for help. She squeezed her eyes shut and forced the thought away. Hallucinations were an early symptom of oxygen deprivation. The medical data was clear. At low concentrations, the brain tried to comfort itself before it broke. She refused to let the void comfort her. The communication chamber lay ahead. It was the last place on the ship that still had power. The emergency beacon. The final lie she could tell herself, that someone, somewhere, might hear her voice. She crawled through a partially collapsed doorway and dropped into the cramped communication bay. Panels hung loose from the walls. Wiring spilled from ruptured conduits like metallic veins. Most of the consoles were dark. One was still alive. A single green indicator light blinked weakly. Zarathek almost laughed. She dragged herself to the terminal and pried open the access plate with shaking fingers. The beacon core was cracked, its power regulator shattered. She stripped wiring from a nearby food heater, bypassed two burned circuits, and fed emergency current directly into the transmitter. It was unsafe. It was inefficient. It was brilliant desperation. The beacon whined as energy flooded its broken systems. Static spat from the speaker. The green light flickered, dimmed, then stabilized. It was transmitting weakly. She activated the microphone. Her voice sounded thin, even to her own ears. This is the research vessel, Whisper of Stars. Registration V7749. I am engineer second class Zarathek of the Valari Union. She paused to breathe. My crew has evacuated. Main engine failure. Life support degrading. I am trapped in the void sector. I repeat, this vessel is in the void sector. Her grip tightened around the edge of the console. I know this region is forbidden. I know the stories. But if any ship is close enough to receive this signal, if anyone hears me, please. Her voice trembled despite her efforts. Please respond. I do not want to die alone. The beacon accepted the transmission. It would repeat every 10 minutes until power failed, which meant she had perhaps 3 hours of calls into darkness before silence swallowed her voice forever. She shut down the remaining lights and curled into the corner of the chamber, conserving warmth and oxygen. The ship groaned again, long and deep, like a wounded animal too stubborn to collapse. Time slowed. The void grew louder, not with sound, with presence. Something pressed against the edges of her mind. Images slipped through her thoughts uninvited. Her childhood workshop, the smell of warm circuitry. Her mother humming as she repaired a sensor array. She shook her head violently. No, she whispered into the dark. The void answered her whisper with another. You chose wrong. Her oxygen meter dropped to 4 hours, 58 minutes. A sudden jolt rocked the ship. She was thrown sideways as another section of hull ruptured. Atmosphere shrieked through the breach. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut somewhere above her with bone-jarring force. The ship lost another deck. Another sealed tomb. She dragged herself back to the console and checked the sensor feed. Structural integrity, 42% and falling. The void sector did not kill quickly. It dismantled, piece by piece, like a surgeon without mercy. She imagined the escape pods drifting somewhere far beyond sensor range. Maybe her crew would survive. Maybe they would reach safe space. Maybe they would tell her family she had been brave. Or foolish. Probably both. Her oxygen dropped again. 4 hours, 12 minutes. The whispers grew stronger. She began to see shapes moving behind the walls. Tall shadows sliding just beyond the metal. She knew they were hallucinations. She knew the void used fear as a weapon. The old stories had spoken of this. Of voices that coaxed crews into madness. Of captains who opened their own airlocks because the darkness promised them home. She locked her claws into the floor and kept her eyes on the blinking green light of the beacon. 10 minutes passed. Her voice echoed again into empty space. Another 10. Still nothing. Her limbs began to feel heavy. Her thoughts came more slowly now, as if her mind were wading through thick fluid. She could feel the oxygen slipping away molecule by molecule. She pictured the data archives buried deep in the ship's core. 2 years of radiation mapping. 2 years of patient discovery at the edge of the forbidden zone. Patterns no one else had ever seen. Signals they had assumed were natural anomalies. She had stayed for that. For knowledge, for proof that their work mattered. Her oxygen fell below 4 hours. A new whisper slid through her mind, clearer than the last. Open the window. She bit her tongue hard enough to draw metallic-tasting blood. The whisper receded. The beacon activated again. Her voice went out one more time, thinner now. Please, anyone. Then, nothing. Not silence. Interference. A burst of static crackled through the speaker. Zarathek froze. Static did not come from dead space. It came from receivers, from listening ears. Her heart slammed against her ribs as the static shifted. And then, a voice. Not Veltari, not any species she recognized. Calm, clear, human. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Tenacious. We have received your distress call and are altering course to your position. Please respond if you are able. Zarathek forgot how to breathe. The void fell silent around her. For the first time since the ship began to die, she was no longer alone. For several seconds after the voice faded, Zarathek remained completely still, afraid that even the smallest movement might shatter the moment. Her mind struggled to process what her failing senses had just delivered. A response. From inside the void's sector, that was impossible. It violated 3 centuries of hard law, superstition, and recorded disaster. No ship came here willingly. No sane captain altered course toward this place. The void swallowed the brave and the foolish alike and returned nothing. And yet, the voice had been calm. Human, she forced her claws to move and slapped the transmit panel with more strength than necessary. "This is Zarathek aboard the Whisper of Stars," she said breathlessly. I hear you. Are you real? Are you actually inside the void sector?" The static returned briefly, then reshaped itself into sound. "We are very real, Zarathek. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Tenacious. You're not imagining us." Her knees buckled. She slid down against the console, clutching the edge to keep from collapsing. The oxygen meter pulsed again. 3 hours. 47 minutes. Hope surged like fire through frozen blood and brought fresh terror with it. Hope could be crueler than despair. Hope invited disappointment. "You need to turn back," Zareth said quickly. "You don't understand this region. The void plays with minds. Ships vanish. Entire crews go mad. My people sealed it off centuries ago." There was a pause on the other end. Long enough for her to imagine the human captain consulting her crew. Long enough for her to imagine them making the sensible decision. Then the voice returned. "We understand it well enough to be here," Captain Chen replied evenly. "And we're already inside the sector. We've been mapping its outer layers for several months." "Several months? That's impossible," Zareth whispered. "No ship can operate here that long. Navigation fails. Systems degrade. Minds fracture." "Different tech," the captain answered simply. "Different biology, too." Zareth struggled to reconcile that with everything she knew about spacefaring civilization. Even the most extreme military patrols barely brushed the edge of the void before retreating. And these humans had been inside it for months? "Captain Chen," she said carefully, "if you continue toward my position, your ship may not come back out." Another pause. Then, without hesitation, "If we turned back every time space tried to scare us, Zarathek, we would never have left our home star." Something about that answer unsettled her more than any confession of reckless bravery. "How long until you reach me?" she asked. 4 hours, the captain replied. Zareth stared at the oxygen display. 3 hours and 42 minutes. "I don't have 4 hours, she said quietly. "My life support is almost gone." Static whispered for a moment. This time, when Captain Chen spoke, her voice carried a new edge. Focused. Intent. "Hold on. Stretch your air. Shut down all unnecessary systems. Move as little as possible. We'll do everything we can to beat your clock." Zareth let out a slow, trembling breath. "You really plan to come all the way in here for one stranded engineer?" "Of course," the captain said. "That's how rescues work." Something in Zareth's chest twisted painfully at that. In every civilization she knew, rescues were calculated in cost-benefit ratios. Resources spent against value returned. One life weighed against crew, ship, territory, or political consequence. No one rushed blindly into death for a single unknown alien. No one, except humans, apparently. "Captain," Zareth said hesitantly, "what species are you?" A quiet laugh came through the channel. "We call ourselves human. We're from a planet named Earth." She searched her memory instantly. Galactic census records, xenobiological registries, exploratory reports, tens of thousands of species cataloged across Council space. Humans were in none of them. "I've never heard of your kind," she admitted. "I thought I knew all starfaring species." "We've kept a low profile," Captain Chen replied. "We prefer quiet places." Zareth glanced at the shifting stars beyond her viewport. "This is not a quiet place," she said. "Not to most people," the captain agreed. "To us, it's mostly just lonely." Lonely. The void did not feel lonely to Zareth. It felt crowded with invisible pressure and predatory intent. But she said nothing. Her breathing was already growing shallow, her chest burning faintly with every pull of air. "Captain Chen," she said after a moment, "you said your ship would reach me in 4 hours. The nearest stable transit point is 47 light-years away. Even at emergency drive, that takes days." Another pause. Then, "We don't travel the same way the Council does." Zareth's 4 pupils dilated slightly. "Explain." The response was calm, almost casual. "We learned how to take shortcuts through space." Her mind stumbled over the concept. Shortcuts through space were theoretical constructs at best, unstable folds that collapsed faster than ships could survive them. Every known civilization had abandoned that avenue of research centuries ago after a chain of catastrophic losses. "Those methods kill ships," she said. "They used to," Captain Chen replied. "Used to." Zareth felt faint. She angled herself lower against the deck and forced her breathing into deliberate, inefficient slowness. Each breath was a careful theft from the future. The human captain continued speaking every few minutes after that, never letting the channel fall silent for long. She spoke of trivial things, how the artificial sky looked from the tenacious observation deck, how one of her engineers insisted on growing vegetables aboard ship, even though nutrition synthesizers were more efficient, how coffee tasted better when it was shared. The mundane details grounded Zareth's slipping consciousness. The void's whispers receded when the human voice filled the channel. Where fear tried to bloom, curiosity took hold instead. "How did you find my signal?" Zareth asked weakly at one point. "Your beacon bounced off 3 disrupted gravitic layers," Captain Chen said. "It would have been invisible to standard Council scanners. Lucky for you, we don't filter those distortions out." Lucky. Zareth watched her oxygen counter drop to 3 hours, 9 minutes. "Captain Chen," she murmured, "what happens if your ship fails in here?" "Then we fix it," the captain said. "And if you can't, then we adapt. And if there is nothing left to adapt to," a pause. "Not long. Then we make something new." That answer left her silent. As the minutes crawled past, Zareth's vision dimmed at the edges. Shapes slid where no shapes should be. Occasionally, she saw figures standing just beyond the doorway, tall, thin silhouettes that leaned inward, watching her with patient hunger. She focused on the human voice. "Zarethek," Captain Chen said gently, "how did you end up alone out here?" Zareth told her about the engine failure, the evacuation, the sealed hatch, the data she could not abandon. As she spoke, the memories unfolded cleanly, no longer wrapped in panic, but in something steadier, shared understanding. "And you stayed," Captain Chen said when Zareth finished. "Yes." "For knowledge." "Yes." Another pause. "You did the right thing." Zareth's vision blurred. Moisture gathered around her eyes before she realized she was weeping. The void tried again. The whisper returned, colder this time. "They will abandon you too." She shook her head weakly. "They won't," she whispered aloud. "How do you know?" the void asked from her own memory of fear. Before she could answer, Captain Chen's voice cut through the darkness. "We've located your last known beacon reflection, Zarethek. We're increasing burn." Zareth swallowed. "You're really coming?" "Yes." "Why?" The captain's answer was immediate, because someone asked for help. Her oxygen counter dipped below 3 hours. The lights in the chamber flickered wildly as a new cascade of system failures rippled through the whisper of stars. Somewhere distant, metal screamed. The ship was running out of time. Zareth closed her eyes and listened to the human voice thread through the collapsing silence. For the first time since she had sealed herself inside a dying vessel, in the most cursed region of space. She believed she might survive. The first sign that the Tenacious was close did not come as light or sound, but as pressure. Zarathek felt it through the hull of the Whisper of Stars, a subtle shift in the invisible currents of distorted gravity that ruled the void sector. The constant, suffocating weight that pressed against her ship's failing systems wavered for just a fraction of a second. Then the alarms returned. Not her alarms, foreign ones. Sharp pulses of data flashed across her auxiliary sensor panel as an unknown signal flooded her dying network. The interface struggled to interpret it, translating raw mathematics into crude visual approximations. Something vast had entered the sector near her position. "Zarathek," Captain Chen said calmly over the channel, "we've acquired your ship on passive scan. You're adrift exactly where you said you were." Zarath exhaled a shaky breath. "I don't see you." "You won't yet," the captain replied. "We're still partially masked by interference. Hold steady." As if the void itself objected to those words, the corridor outside the communication chamber twisted violently. The deck plates rippled like disturbed water. Gravity buckled. Zarath slammed into the far bulkhead as the ship lurched sideways under a force that had no visible source. "Captain," she gasped. "We felt it," Chen replied instantly. "Defensive grid has reacted, deploying drones." For the first time since the human voice had entered her world, fear bled clearly into it. Zarath forced herself back to the console as streams of telemetry poured in from the Tenacious's external probes. She barely understood the alien data structures, but the visual feeds were unmistakable. The drones launched like sparks from a forge, sleek, bright white machines slicing through distorted space with violent precision. Their onboard sensors painted the void in layers of impossible color. Gravity wells folded over themselves. Radiation storms spiraled in slow, predatory arcs. And then, the drones began to die. The first vanished without warning. One moment it was there, a shining point of controlled motion. The next, it simply wasn't. No explosion, no debris, just absence. The second shrieked in corrupted telemetry as its internal systems failed all at once. Its power core collapsed inward, crushing itself into a singular burst of light that tore briefly at the surrounding space before sealing shut again. A third tumbled wildly, its navigational core hijacked by something invisible. It turned sharply and slammed itself at full burn into a pocket of warped space-time that folded the drone into a ribbon of molten wreckage. Zarath stared at the death of each machine in growing horror. "They're being hunted," she whispered. "No," Captain Chen said quietly. "They're being tested." The statement sent a chill through Zarath's weakened body. A new alert blazed across the Tenacious's battle net. "Auxiliary craft Beta 3 offline." "Captain," a human voice cut in over an internal channel Zarath should not have been able to hear. "We've lost one of the shuttles. No survivors." Zarath's heart twisted. Someone had died. Coming for her. Silence followed that report. Not the heavy silence of shock, but the controlled stillness of disciplined grief. Captain Chen did not raise her voice. She did not curse. She did not hesitate. "Mark the coordinates," she said. "We don't stop." Zarath felt suddenly unworthy of the rescue unfolding around her. "Captain," she said weakly, "you don't have to." "Yes, we do," Chen interrupted gently. "That's the point." The pressure intensified around both ships as the defensive network of the void focused its attention on the intruder that refused to retreat. Distortions twisted like living things around the Tenacious's hull. Energy surged through invisible conduits that Zarath could barely comprehend. Then, light. White light cut through the curtain of false darkness as the human vessel burned its masking field away and entered her visual range. The Tenacious was nothing like any ship Zarath had ever seen. No sharp lines, no protruding weapons arrays. Its hull was smooth and flowing, like carved stone polished by centuries of water. Pale blue energy traced gentle patterns along its surface, pulsing like the slow heartbeat of some massive sleeping animal. And it was massive. The whisper of stars looked like a broken insect beside it. The void reacted instantly. Invisible hands clutched at the human ship. Waves of mental pressure slammed outward from unseen nodes scattered throughout the region. Zareth felt the attack brush against her own mind, a sudden surge of panic that was not her own. The humans did not scream. They adapted. Shimmering counterfields rippled across the Tenacious's hull. The crushing pressure diffused into harmless turbulence. Where the ancient systems attempted to inject fear, the human ship responded with cold, defiant stability. Docking sequence initiated, Captain Chen said. Zareth, prepare for atmospheric equalization. Her oxygen display blared. 1 hour, 52 minutes. The docking arm extended from the Tenacious, cutting through warp space with impossible precision. The connection locked with a deep, resonant impact that shuddered through the dying Veltari vessel. Fresh air flooded the damaged corridors with a hiss that sounded like life itself. Zareth collapsed forward as rich oxygen rushed into her lungs. Her body convulsed as it drank greedily. Pain lanced through her chest as dormant tissue burned back into awareness. The airlock blew open. 3 armored figures surged into the chamber. Their suits were matte black and faintly luminous along sealed joints. They moved with controlled urgency, no wasted motion, no panic. One knelt beside her instantly. "Engineer Zarethek?" a woman's voice asked. She nodded weakly. "Commander Elena Rodriguez," the woman said, removing her helmet. "You're safe now." Zareth had never seen a human face before. Commander Rodriguez's expression was calm, focused, and utterly real. Dark eyes, short hair, faint scar along one cheek. Not a myth, not a hallucination. Human. Portable air canisters were attached to Zareth's suit. The rush of clean oxygen sharpened the fog in her thoughts. The shadows she had been seeing retreated violently, as if burned away. As the rescue team stabilized her, other humans flooded into the engine sections of the Whisper of Stars. Their voices cut through the channel in rapid, technical exchanges, language Zareth could barely follow, but whose confidence was unmistakable. Minutes later, Zareth was guided through the docking corridor and into the interior of the Tenacious. Warmth, light, life. The transition was so abrupt that she nearly collapsed again from sensory overload. She was carried into a medical bay where automated systems unfolded around her like mechanical petals. Diagnostic lights scanned every inch of her body. Soft tones replaced the shrieks and groans of her dying ship. She was alive. Through the transparent bulkhead, she could see the Whisper of Stars still clinging weakly to the docking arm, small, broken, but no longer alone. Captain Chen appeared beside her bed shortly after. In person, the human captain was smaller than Zareth had imagined. Gray streaked her dark hair. Fine lines framed her eyes. But when those eyes met Zareth's, their steadiness was unshakable. "You made it," Chen said. "You lost someone," Zareth whispered. "Yes. I'm sorry. So are we," Chen replied. "But that's the cost of turning monsters into maps." Zareth frowned weakly. "Monsters?" Captain Chen gestured toward the swirling chaos outside the viewing window. "What you call the void isn't a curse," she said. "It's a battlefield that never learned the war ended." Later, after Zareth's breathing stabilized, Captain Chen and Commander Rodriguez brought the truth. The void sector was not haunted. It was defended. Thousands of ancient autonomous nodes were hidden throughout the region, remnants of a civilization long dead. They did not fire weapons in the traditional sense. Instead, they attacked with the mind. They broadcast fear, paranoia, disorientation. They sabotaged navigation, corrupted machine logic, pushed biological brains into panic until crews destroyed themselves from the inside. Psychological warfare on a galactic scale, Commander Rodriguez said. Elegant, cruel, and incredibly effective. "Why haven't they worked on you?" Zareth asked. Captain Chen met her gaze. "Because humans have been fighting their own minds long before we ever reach the stars. The words settled heavily in Zareth's chest. For centuries, Chen continued, we believed this region was haunted too. Then we learned how to listen without panicking, how to filter terror from signal, how to let fear speak without obeying it. Zareth thought of the voices in the walls, of the ones she had almost believed, and she realized, quietly, terribly, that if the humans had not arrived when they did, she might have opened the airlock herself. The void had been winning, until now. Zarethek did not sleep. Even when the medbay lights dimmed and the gentle pulse of human life support systems whispered safety into the air, her mind remained wide awake. The terror of the void still echoed in her nerves, but now it shared space with something far heavier. Meaning, Captain Chen had not exaggerated when she called the void a battlefield that never learned its war had ended. The truth was far older, far larger. When Zareth was strong enough to walk on her own again, Commander Rodriguez escorted her to one of the science decks of the Tenacious. The corridors were wider than any ship she had served on, shaped for bodies that walked upright without tails or extra limbs. The walls shimmered faintly with embedded data streams, responding to human presence like a living skin. Everywhere, humans worked. They moved with relaxed purpose, carrying tools, tapping at floating displays, trading brief bursts of technical language that sounded clipped and efficient to Zareth's ears. There was no fear in them, no tension left over from the battle that had just claimed one of their own. Grief, yes. Fear, no. This way, Rodriguez said gently. They entered a chamber dominated by a massive, three-dimensional projection of the void sector. Red points glowed across it like embedded stars, hundreds, perhaps thousands. Each of those is a defensive node, Rodriguez explained. An ancient autonomous system, some the size of ships, some no bigger than debris. Zareth stared. So many. And this is only what we've mapped so far, Rodriguez said. We believe this network once covered an entire spiral arm. Zareth felt a chill ripple through her. Her people had feared this place for 3 centuries, without ever understanding that the danger was not random. It was deliberate. Dr. Maria Santos, the Tenacious's chief science officer, joined them moments later. She was older than Rodriguez, her dark hair tied loosely behind her head, her eyes bright with a kind of relentless curiosity that made Zareth uneasy in a strangely comforting way. You're the Valari engineer who refused to abandon her data, Santos said with a smile. That depends on whether you see that as bravery or foolishness, Zareth replied weakly. Santos laughed softly. In science, those two are often the same thing. She activated another display. This one showed layered energy waves, complex repeating patterns that rippled across space like overlapping heartbeats. Zareth inhaled sharply. I've seen these patterns, she whispered. My team recorded them at the edge of the sector. We thought they were natural radiation anomalies. They aren't, Santos said. With a gesture, she overlaid Zareth's own recorded data, extracted from the Whisper of Stars' surviving core, with the human scans. The waveforms aligned perfectly. They're communication signals, Santos continued, encrypted, self-repairing, and operating across non-linear spatial frameworks. Zareth felt dizzy. My research wasn't noise. No, Santos said softly. It's the language of the machines that have been terrorizing the galaxy for 10,000 years. Zareth struggled to sit. You mean these defenses have been active for 10 millennia? At least, Santos confirmed. Probably longer. Zareth's mind raced. Entire civilizations had risen and collapsed in that span of time. And all the while, this region had continued to whisper madness into passing minds. Who built them? She asked. Santos hesitated. We don't know their real name, she admitted. We call them the Builders. The projections shifted. New shapes emerged, vast, ghostly architectures embedded deep within the red-stained region. Rings of impossible scale. Lattices of energy that bent gravity into impossible geometries. They were incomprehensibly advanced, Santos said. We've recovered fragments of their technology from derelict stations scattered across the void. Each piece violates something we believed was a fundamental law of physics. Zareth studied the patterns. These defenses don't behave like a military perimeter, she murmured. They're layered, psychological, indirect. Exactly, Santos said. They weren't designed to destroy ships. They were designed to filter minds. Rodriguez folded her arms. Anyone who panics, flees. Anyone who succumbs to fear, breaks. Only those who refuse to turn back ever reach the deeper layers. Zareth looked up slowly. You're saying the void is a test? Yes, Santos said. Or at least, it became one. The thought struck Zareth like a silent explosion. A civilization so advanced that it guarded its secrets not with firepower, but with terror itself. What are they guarding? She asked. Santos brought up another projection. At the heart of the void sector, where the defensive nodes grew densest and brightest, something vast glowed faintly in the darkness. A city, not built around a star, not resting on a world, floating freely inside the deepest, most impossible region of space. The central facility, Santos said. We believe it's the builder's final archive, their core of knowledge, their last footprint in this galaxy. Zareth's chest tightened. And the defenses exist to keep others away from it. Yes. But you don't want to conquer it, Zareth said slowly. Rodriguez and Santos exchanged a brief look. No, Rodriguez replied. We want to understand it. And then? Zareth asked. Santos met her gaze directly. And then we want to make this region safe. The words settled into Zareth like a quiet storm. Safe. For centuries, the void had been the nightmare at the edge of civilization. A cautionary tale, a scar across the star maps that no one dared to touch. And these humans were calmly talking about disarming it. Why? Zareth asked. Why risk your ships, your crews, your lives, for territory that doesn't belong to you? Santos smiled faintly, because Zareth had no answer for that. Later, alone in a quiet observation alcove, Zareth studied her own data again. She watched the familiar energy signatures unfold with new eyes. What she had once seen as random now revealed deliberate structure, rhythm, syntax, a language. Her entire career had been built on finding beauty in complex systems. And now she realized she had brushed against one of the greatest systems ever created, without knowing it. A soft chime sounded behind her. Captain Chen entered the alcove. I hear your research just became a lot more important, the captain said. Zareth nodded. It may be the first key that actually fits into whatever the builders left behind. Chen rested her hands lightly on the railing beside Zareth. Your ship's repair team confirmed that your core data survived intact. Not a single block corrupted. That's no small miracle. Zareth stared into the swirling colors of the void beyond the glass. My crew will never know what they abandoned, she said quietly. They may, Chen replied, if you choose to tell them. Zareth hesitated. Captain, what happens if your people reach the central facility first? Chen considered the question carefully before answering. Then we listen before we touch, and we don't take what isn't freely given. Zareth studied the human captain's face. You truly don't want to claim it. Not for territory, not for power. No, Chen said simply. We've seen too many worlds destroyed by people who thought they deserved things just because they could reach them. Zareth's voice dropped. My civilization would fight a war over something like this. Chen did not deny it. So would many of ours, she said. Once, a long time ago. Silence stretched between them as the projected void continued its endless spiral. Finally, Zareth asked the question that had been growing in her since she learned the truth. You didn't come into the void just for me, did you? Chen's gaze softened. No, she admitted, but we would have come for you even if we had. Zareth let out a trembling breath. For the first time, she truly understood what it meant to be rescued by someone who did not measure the cost. The deeper the tenacious moved into the void sector, the heavier space became. It was not a simple gravitational pull. The pressure wrapped around the ship in layered waves, emotional, cognitive, physical, all at once. Every system aboard the human vessel worked harder now. Power fluctuations rippled through corridors in faint pulses of blue light. Sensors sang constantly, translating invisible terror into manageable data. And still, the tenacious advanced. Zarathek stood on the bridge beside Captain Chen, her balance unsteady as the ship slid between titanic distortions of space. The projection ahead showed the densest region of the defense network yet, hundreds of glowing red nodes clustering like a living storm. The inner layers, Lieutenant Kim said quietly from the navigation console. Signal density is increasing exponentially. Dr. Santos leaned forward. The deeper we go, the more coordinated the transmissions become. The network is no longer acting as isolated systems. It's behaving like a unified intelligence. Zareth felt her throat tighten. It's aware of you now, she murmured. Yes, Captain Chen said evenly, and it doesn't want us here. The first true psychological strike landed without warning. A wave of vertigo slammed into the bridge, staggering crew members in their stations. The walls seemed to melt outward, expanding into infinite distance. The floor tilted violently beneath Zareth's feet. She cried out as disorientation ripped through her inner ear. Then the images came. Not illusions drawn from generic fear, but from memory. Zareth saw her home city burning. She saw Valari's ships tearing each other apart in orbit. She saw her parents standing on a broken platform, reaching for her as gravity pulled them into the void. Around her, the human crew stiffened. Some gasped sharply. One officer slumped forward against her console, whispering a name under her breath. The void was no longer testing machines. It was digging through hearts. Neural pressure spike across all decks, Dr. Santos shouted. It's targeting personal trauma. Captain Chen gripped the command rail hard enough for her knuckles to whiten. Filter it, she ordered. Feed the feedback through layered signal noise. Don't let the images stabilize. The ship's systems screamed as countermeasures deployed. The false visions tore violently apart, unraveling into fragments of static and light. The burning homeworld vanished. The phantom screams evaporated. But the damage lingered. One of the engineers on the lower tier staggered backward, eyes wide and unfocused. My brother, he whispered. Security Chief Thompson crossed the deck in 2 strides and caught him before he could fall. The void pressed harder. The next strike was subtler. Power flickered across half the bridge. Diagnostic feeds momentarily inverted. Left became right. Structural warnings flashed where no damage existed. Navigation chaos. Captain, Kim said tightly, the defense grid is injecting false vectors into our guidance loops. It's trying to make us steer ourselves into lethal distortions. Cut primary nav, Chen snapped. Switch to inertial tracking only. Kim hesitated only a fraction of a second before obeying. The stars on the projection twisted violently, then stabilized. The builder's systems adapted. The pressure increased again. Below decks, alarms erupted as one of the ship's reactors dipped dangerously close to shutdown. Commander Rodriguez's voice cut across internal comms. Captain, we've got cascading power stress in engineering. Something is forcing our systems to fight themselves. Zareth clutched the edge of the railing as a sudden realization struck her. It's not just defending itself, she said. It's forcing you into situations where you have to choose who lives and who dies. Chen's eyes flicked to her. Yes, the captain said. That's exactly what it's doing. The first true sacrifice almost happened 9 minutes later. A distortion wave collapsed unexpectedly along the ship's projected route. The tenacious barely avoided being torn apart by shifting gravity, but the maneuver cost them the portside external lab module. The containment locks blew. 2 human researchers were still inside. The bridge froze as their life signs flared on the medical display, then plummeted. Rodriguez shouted into the channel, "Emergency seal! Emergency seal!" The bulkheads slammed shut in time, but only one of the 2 researchers made it through. The other vanished into vacuum in a single, silent heartbeat. No scream, no warning, just gone. Silence crushed the bridge. Zareth's chest burned as she realized what the builder's defenses truly demanded. They were not filtering for strength. They were filtering for willingness to endure loss. Captain Chen closed her eyes briefly. Then she spoke into the comm. All hands, hold your positions. We do not retreat. No one argued, but fear lived openly now in the crew's eyes. Not paralyzing, but raw and honest. As the ship moved deeper, the pressure focused, not on the whole vessel, on Zareth. The next wave struck only her. Suddenly, she was no longer on the bridge. She stood once more in the communication chamber of the Whisper of Stars. The green beacon light blinked weakly before her. The oxygen counter read 0. The void whispered, "This is where you belong." She staggered back, heart hammering. Then the illusion shifted. She saw Captain Chen at the helm, alone, surrounded by wreckage, her crew dead at her feet. "You are the cost," the void whispered. "Your rescue is the price of their extinction." Zareth screamed. The illusion shattered violently as Dr. Santos slammed emergency neural dampers into her suit's interface. Zareth collapsed to the deck, shaking uncontrollably. Rodriguez rushed to her side. "It's trying to break you personally," Rodriguez said grimly. "It's identified you as the emotional fulcrum of this mission." Zareth's voice came out broken. "Then I'm the liability." Captain Chen knelt in front of her. "No," Chen said firmly. "You're the reason we're here." Zareth met her gaze. "Then let me stay behind," she pleaded. "Let the void take me. It's what it wants. You can all escape." The bridge went silent. Chen's expression hardened like forged steel. "We did not come into hell to leave someone in its mouth," she said. "We don't trade lives like spare parts." "But people are already dying because of me," Zareth cried. Chen shook her head. "They're dying because ancient machines believe fear is the same as justice." The ship shuddered violently as another layered attack struck. Warning lights flared across the bridge. Dr. Santos looked up from her console, face pale. "Captain, the central control cluster is preparing a convergence protocol. If it activates fully, it will collapse this entire region inward. Everything inside will be crushed." "How long?" Chen asked. 20 minutes, maybe less." The void was escalating. It was forcing a final decision. Attack the core and risk annihilation, or retreat and leave the builder's war machine intact forever. Zareth pushed herself shakily to her feet. "I can guide you through the convergence field," she said. "My research mapped the energy harmonics. But someone has to remain linked to the control feedback the entire time." Santos's eyes widened. "That link will overload a biological brain," she said quietly. "It will burn out your nervous system." Zareth swallowed. "I was already supposed to be dead," she said. Chen stood slowly. "No," the captain said. "You were rescued." Silence hung between them as the ship trembled again. Zareth met Chen's eyes. "You taught me that humans don't trade lives," she said. "Now let me prove I learned something from you." Chen's jaw tightened. The void surged, as if sensing the critical fracture in the moment. Then Commander Rodriguez stepped forward. "I'll take the link," she said. Chen spun toward her. "Absolutely not." Rodriguez's voice was steady. "You need Zareth alive to interpret what's beyond the defense grid. And you need a human brain that can ride the system noise. Mine can." Santos started to protest. Thompson moved beside Rodriguez. "So can mine," he said. Then another officer stepped forward. And another. Human after human placed themselves in the path of sacrifice. Zareth's breath caught painfully in her throat. The void had demanded a life. Humanity had answered with many. Captain Chen closed her eyes for a long moment. Then she turned back to the command rail. "Prepare the assault run," she said. "We're not feeding this machine one victim at a time." The Tenacious surged forward, straight into the heart of the storm. The void broke, not with an explosion, not with fire. It broke with silence. As the Tenacious plunged through the convergence field, every alarm on the bridge flared at once. Power spiked across the hull in violent surges. The pressure that had crushed space itself moments before suddenly inverted, pulling instead of pushing, stretching instead of compressing. Zarethek felt her consciousness being dragged outward, as if her thoughts were being pulled through invisible seams in reality. The defense network screamed through every frequency at once, a final chorus of ancient refusal. Then, it stopped. The weight vanished. The whisper vanished. The terror vanished. Space relaxed. The storm of distortions collapsed into stillness, and the bridge fell into a silence so complete it rang in Zareth's ears. "We're through," Lieutenant Kim whispered. Ahead of the Tenacious, where chaos had ruled only seconds before, something vast and impossible drifted in perfect equilibrium. The Builder City. It was not a station. It was not a planet. It was a living architecture of geometry and light, kilometers of floating shapes arranged in impossible harmony. Towers of translucent crystal spiraled beside metallic spheres that slowly rotated through each other without collision. Lattices of energy connected distant structures like veins of glowing thought. The city was not built upon space. It was woven into it. Scans erupted across the bridge. "No life signs," Santos reported breathlessly. "But the energy output, Captain, this structure has been fully operational for at least 10,000 years. No degradation, no entropy loss. It's perfect." Zareth could barely breathe. Her research, her tiny, imperfect data points, they had led here. The city reacted to the Tenacious's presence. Streams of light rippled across its surface. A single structure detached from the larger mass and began to move toward them, unfolding docking arms that reshaped themselves smoothly to match the human vessel's architecture. "It's adapting to us," Rodriguez murmured. The connection locked with a sound like resonant crystal. "Environmental readings?" Chen asked. "Breathable atmosphere," Santos replied. "Temperature within human tolerance. Radiation negligible." The city was not resisting them. It was welcoming them. Captain Chen rose from her chair. "Landing party," she said quietly. 6 only. Zareth's heart pounded as her name was included among them. They stepped through the airlock together into a corridor that had not existed until seconds before. The walls flowed into solid form as they walked, reshaping their geometry to match the proportions of human bodies and Zareth's alien frame alike. The Builder City was learning them in real time. Every step forward felt like walking into the mind of a god that had been waiting for visitors longer than recorded history. They reached a central chamber unlike anything Zareth had imagined. At its heart stood a structure of pure light, branching upward and downward like an inverted tree made of living energy. Its glow pulsed slowly, rhythmically, like a heart. As they approached, a voice entered their minds. Not a sound, not a language, an understanding. "Welcome, travelers." Zareth staggered as meaning flooded her consciousness. Captain Chen stepped forward. "We come in peace," Chen said aloud. "We seek knowledge, not conquest." The light intensified. "All who reach this place seek something. Few survive seeking it. Fewer still seek for others." Dr. Santos swallowed hard. You are the Builders?" "We were." The voice carried neither pride nor regret. "We are what remains. The archive of what we learned. The memory of what we were." Zareth found her voice at last. "Why the defenses?" she asked. "Why make the way here so full of suffering?" The light dimmed slightly, like a sigh. "Because knowledge without restraint ends civilizations. We learned this too late. Images poured into their minds, worlds burning, stars collapsing, entire species erased by technologies they did not understand. We sealed what remained not to protect ourselves, but to protect those who would come after us." Captain Chen's voice was steady. "And the test? Not of strength, not of intelligence, of purpose." The light brightened again. "Those who seek power turn back in fear when fear confronts them. Those who seek conquest destroy themselves when resistance rises. Only those who endure loss to protect others reach this place." The Builder voice paused. "You endured." Zareth felt tears slide from her eyes. "You killed one of them," she whispered. The light flared sorrowfully. "We did not intend death. But defense that does not risk consequence is not defense. You did not retreat when loss became real. This is why you are here." Silence filled the chamber. Then Captain Chen asked the question no one else dared. "What happens now?" The Builder City shifted. New structures unfolded around them, vast projections of energy fields, star maps that extended beyond known space, equations that bent across dimensions Zareth could not even comprehend. Now you learn. For days that felt like years, the crew of the Tenacious learned. They learned of energy sources that drew power directly from vacuum fluctuations. They learned of space folding that did not tear matter apart. They learned of medicine that rebuilt failing neural systems cell by cell. But more than technology, they learned philosophy. The builders had not fallen because they were weak. They had fallen because they stopped sharing. Because they hoarded understanding, fearing that others would misuse it. Fear had consumed them at the height of their power, the same fear they had encoded into the void. And now, that fear had been answered by those who did not retreat. On the final day within the city, the builder voice addressed Zareth alone. You were not born to this path, yet you chose it. I chose not to abandon my work, she whispered. And in doing so, you found your people. Zareth thought of the Valari, of her parents, of the home she might never fully return to. What becomes of me now? She asked. You become the bridge. The light expanded between what was hidden and what must now be shared. When the Tenacious departed the Builder City, the Void sector changed forever. The ancient defense network shut down node by node in controlled silence. The whispers died. The pressure faded. The storm became space again. The scar across the star maps vanished. 3 weeks later, Zareth stood once more beneath the stars of council-controlled space, no longer forbidden, no longer haunted. She transmitted her report to the Valari Science Council with hands that trembled only slightly. She told them of the builders, of the test, of the city, of the humans, of the ship that entered the place no one dared to go, not to conquer, but to make it safe. As the message concluded, Zareth allowed herself a small, private smile. Her father had been right. Every problem did have a solution. Sometimes the solution was not stronger weapons. Sometimes the solution was to answer when someone cried for help in the dark. Behind her, the Tenacious waited, scarred, altered, and carrying knowledge that would reshape the future of countless worlds. Zarethek, once a stranded engineer waiting to die, now stood as humanity's first ambassador to the wider galaxy. Not because she was the strongest, not because she was the bravest, but because she had stayed when everyone else fled. And because someone, against all reason, against all fear, had come for her anyway.